Welcome to this webinar in a series on helping you navigate the resources and various options available to you as an operator. This webinar will focus on reopening or increasing your current operations with thoughts and insights directed toward finance-related matters. This webinar is brought to you by Performance Food Group to provide you with ideas and resources to help you in this time of industry distress. Additional webinars and other resources can be found on Performance Food Group's website under COVID-19 resources for operators. Page 2 contains certain legal disclaimers. Please take a minute to review. As businesses are in different stages of operations, certain matters may not apply, or their application may be different based on individual facts and circumstances. Today's agenda will focus on providing thoughts and insights into various finance-related matters as it relates to reopening in the short-term and mid-term operational support in several areas listed. And we'll also talk about resources. The panel today. My name is Keith Middleton, and I currently serve as the co-managing partner of Fahrenheit Advisors. I oversee our consulting and fractional financial management practices. Joining me today is Jim Woodward. Jim is a managing director in our business advisory practice and has over 35 years of providing strategic business, finance, and operational expertise focused on growth as well as crisis management. As a senior executive, Jim has led organizations through the impact of SARS, the swine flu, and the recession of 2008-2009, and is with us today to share his thoughts and insights into helping operators think about reopening and getting to sustainability. Welcome, Jim. As operators begin to think about reopening or increasing their current operations, as many of them have been doing takeout, what should they be focused on now?
Thank you, Keith. And first, in big picture, we're going to talk about focusing on what you can control and maybe identifying those things that you can't necessarily control, but you can have some influence over. But some specific points, and we'll go into these in a little more detail, is, what's the cost to reopen? Do you have the capital to reopen? What's your cash flow analysis? What are other options for financing whatever your cash needs? And lastly, how's all of this going to impact your business model, including your workforce, what you offer to your consumer, and your people?
Thanks, Jim. I think the first area that we'll talk about is working capital. And we've talked a lot in the past about the various SBA loan programs, the PPP loans, and the various relief funds. So that's an initial area that operators can look to for working capital. But in addition to that, the Treasury has rolled out the Main Street loan program, payroll tax deferrals, and as always, friends and family, private investors. Interesting in the restaurant operating world, crowdfunding has become popular, as well as several alternative lenders have really opened up lately into some financing. So there's different areas that operators can go find working capital, and we'll talk about in a minute kind of why that's important. Because cash and working capital are going to be key to reopening, but just as much the reopening is getting to break even and then ongoing sustainability of your operations. And so when we talk about working capital, I guess really the first step is around cash flow analysis and forecasting. And so, Jim, when operators are performing cash flow analysis around reopening cost and forecasting future cash flows, what's 3 to 5 things that they really need to focus in on?
There are a couple of things, but first I should think about, look, a good cash flow analysis forecasting is going to be like your crystal ball into a uncertain world. So when we think about that, you got to think about with the impact of reduced customer counts, the reopening rules. Are there going to be capacity limitations? all those things will impact the timing and flow of your revenues, because I believe it's going to take a while to restore to what we perceived as normal, or maybe even the new normal. You've got to think about whatever the expenditures are going to be for safety and sanitation requirements, and also to make sure your customers are comfortable. And when you do this cash flow analysis, you should extend it for several months. And it should be a living document. You need to update it, because as you learn and process the business, you're going to learn more about it. And lastly, sensitize your cash flow analysis. Come up with a likely scenario, a best scenario, and then, a worst scenario.
Great. As we work beyond kind of what the cash flow is and the forecasting to get to reopening, the next step is really understanding what does it take to run in this new environment, new business model, what it is to break even, because that's kind of like the next big step. And so as operators are looking at a break-even analysis, again, what's kind of 3 to 5 things they should consider?
Well, it really goes back to a lot of the same things in your cash flow analysis. But first and foremost, that break-even analysis, it'll keep you from just rushing through an open elevator door, so to speak. Your break-even analysis will help you understand, does it even make sense for me to reopen now? Or do I need to wait for additional restrictions to be lifted on how we're going to operate? And I encourage everybody to be optimistic, but be pragmatic about your break-even analysis. As with the cash flow forecast, you should focus on what you can control, and then also, but evaluate those factors that you may be able to influence, but not fully control.
Obviously, one of the big areas for operators is vendors, and with the very quick onset of the virus, very quick stay-at-home orders, and a lot of restaurants were closed to shut down. Obviously, there's some vendors out there, and so how does, when we're looking to reopen or increase our operations, what's some best practices around operators working with their vendors to reopen, but also to stay open?
Vendor management in a situation like this is one of those things that you can't maybe control it, but you can have a strong influence on the outcome there. And one of the first steps is you need to make a list of your vendors, and who do you think is going to need to be paid now or brought current, and who can wait? Because keep in mind that coming out of this, everybody's going to want to get paid because they haven't been, and everybody's going to want to get back in business and get going. Other things to think about are, what vendors may you need to re-engage with. If you haven't talked to your vendors and you're getting ready to open, pick up the phone, give them a call, let them know, hey, it's been a while, swap some stories, and tell them that, you're looking forward to doing business. Will there be new costs or services that were required for you to open, and does that require a new vendor? What vendors are going to be open to different financial arrangements, be it a discount or a trade deal, and then as far as our new renegotiation of terms, some vendors you're going to have more leverage with, and so it'll be easier to get them to do renegotiation terms, and some vendors are going to have more leverage on you. But by going through this analysis, you'll be less surprised by those potential outcomes.
Yeah, and I think one key vendor area that we get a lot of questions around is just, whether it's restaurants or retail or even offices that are forced to shut down, is really working with your landlord. And the key there is being very open and honest and direct with all of your vendors around, realistically, what can you commit to, and then make sure that you commit to and deliver on that commitment. And through all of this kind of unprecedented times we're in, committing and delivering on those commitments, I think, is key for all of your vendors. We've talked a lot about, and operators really need to focus in on kind of cash flow, break even, working capital, where are they going to get the working capital, and then obviously the vendor management, a lot of different things. But what are some other kind of key areas that the operators need to focus in on the finance side?
Yeah, a couple of those things are just going to be items that just come naturally to a good restaurant operator. You know, food costs and labor costs, and in particular in those areas, you know, now's the time where you're going to have to practice some ultimate flexibility, if you will, because, you know, does the new rules require you to redo your menu to where maybe you're using one item for multiple dishes? And the same thing on labor. You know, you see the customer flow, back to the customer flows, and, you know, the seating capacities. You know, labor, you're just going to have to be very flexible with your labor costs. And also, you know, then it comes back to, well, how is your customer going to know that you're open? Conditions under which you were open. So are there going to be marketing plans and costs? And then lastly, you know, and under that regard is all of these things, you know, how's that going to change maybe your pricing of your product, you know, of your menu, or what is it you're going to do to lure that customer back in with pricing or menu items? One area that I think that's often kind of just not top of mind, and that's risk insurance. And by risk insurance, I mean, you know, who is the carrier that's insuring your building, your equipment, and your workers' comp? You know, reaching out to them because they're experts in risk. And this is something that they may have programs, either where you can help you financially or operationally, that they're sharing with all of them. So just reaching out to your broker or to your risk insurance provider can also be a good idea, a good source of ideas.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, the insurance providers and brokers are right now just a great place for people to turn to for help as it relates to reopening and risk. As always, in addition to this webinar, other resources, both industry and otherwise, can be found on the PFG website. Fahrenheit Advisors continues to release insights, both technical and leadership related, daily on our website. And in addition to this webinar, there's a detailed document that goes along with this that you'll be able to find on the PFG website. It'll provide some more details around this subject. So Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you.